Hey everyone, welcome to Gene Key 21. It is Sunday, April 2nd, and our transmission today is about control. So, how much control are you exercising in your life and in the lives of others? Control is something that we all face. Even people who you don't think control, because control is the main way. This is in the ring of humanity. It's the main way that we buffer ourselves against some pretty big concepts like death, dying, like existential annihilation, like we're not going to be here. And so we control our lives. That's like the big picture. And then there's the things that happen to you in your life that you literally had no control over when you were younger. And so you have created a matrix of control, either anti-control or control. And even people who are anti-control can be perceived as controlling in different areas, because you can't control is a fucking matrix. You're not going to get out of it. You're not going to get out of the matrix of control. I just came into a situation where my family members thought that I was being controlling. And there were two instances. And when they shared with me the two instances, I was like, oh no, I was doing that because I wanted to do something for you. It was actually my motive was to celebrate this person's birthday and to really honor and acknowledge them. So I had a very special, loving in my heart what I wanted to do for this person. And it didn't come across that way. It came across as controlling. And so I had to reflect on that. There is one level at which, my family interprets me in a way that is not my highest. They don't see me in my highest. And that's a lot of times how we incarnated, and Gene Key 21 people, same. But there's also a part of it where I had to look at what was underneath these desires to support or to honor. Really, it was to honor and love this person. And what I got was that I was afraid that they wouldn't know. I was afraid. So there's a fear. I was afraid of them dying because they're older. And I was afraid that they didn't know that I loved them. Isn't that interesting? So that's where, so it came to a fear, and it came to this existential fear around death, which is fully mine. It's fully ours, it's humanity, but I got to own that in that instance, that's what's happening over here. And so it had me really go inward and ask myself, what if that's just the truth? What if that is the truth, that person is going to die, because it is, right? We're all going to die. And yeah, just so feel that for yourself. Just feel that for yourself. What does it feel like when you're trying to mitigate death and it comes off looking like control to yourself or someone else? And maybe your control shows up in your diet, where you have the rigid pattern in the 5 body types, and so you're really good at discipline, but it's become too rigid. So control to me is like this. It's like this yoga that we're always walking, because it's a lever. It's like putting your foot on the gas pedal. You've got to put your foot on the gas pedal. You get to. So you have to have some control. You have to have some discipline, right? And because people who are who are so go with the flow, are just super afraid to be responsible, super afraid that they're going to fail, actually. And that's what we get to overcome right there. We get to figure out where we are in the lever. It's like, are we applying too much gas or not enough gas on the gas pedal? And so it's a yoga. It's not about being perfect. It's really about seeing ourselves. It's really about witnessing ourselves, because we have such tremendous power that we're oftentimes throwing it away because we don't know what to do with all this power. And what is power really? Power is the ability to affect change, the ability to make a difference, the ability to make an impact, one way or another, good or bad, right? It's personal power. And some people don't want any personal power because that freaks them out. They're, attracted and also repulsed because why? Well, it's again responsibility. It's again accountability. So like, yes, you said that. So now you're accountable. You said that. You did that. It's all accountability. And that can be really scary because what happens inside of accountability is I'm going to fail. I'm going to get criticized. So just notice that this Jinky 21 is in the ring of humanity. And there isn't anyone who isn't feeling these pressures of what it's like to be human. If we go through the pantheon of the gene keys inside of the ring of humanity, which I've written down, it's self-obsession. So here we are in our narcissistic culture, and we're really feeling like, do people like me? Am I good enough? Do I look good? That's our self-obsession in the ring of humanity. We also talked last week about opinions, being opinionated, which really isn't opinionated. It's being defensive, defending your positions. That's another gene key inside of the ring of humanity. And then control and constriction. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So here we are, just in our body, we just feel so freaking tense. And then gene key 38, struggle. We're struggling to find meaning, but we're struggling in day-to-day life. We've taken that existential call to action to find meaning in life, and we have confused it with our daily routine. So we actually just create struggle. And then the last shadow of 6 shadows in the ring of humanity is the shadow of agitation. And we're going to get to that next week. Just feeling so freaking agitated in your body. And where does that agitation go? I think that's such a great, because that's a body, that's a visceral experience. So like, those are the shadow frequencies inside of the ring of humanity of what it means to be human. And we all are dealing with them. So control, I'm going to unpack that a little bit more, but it really has inside of it a deep level of power. And just like what happened to me in my family life, when I go inside and look at control, then I get to see myself in a deeper way. And all the answers are inside, right? All the fears are mine to meet. It's not really that family members to meet, right? Because they have their own fears. They don't need to deal with my fears on top of it. They have their own fears to meet. And so I get to take that inward and see how I am not being seen, and also clean up the thing that has me running from fear. And I don't mean clean up as in stop, because I don't know that that's not my goal personally. What my goal would be is to bring love to that, just to witness it and see it. And thereby it does clean itself up. And then I can come from a more pure expression of love. Because after all, that's there too. That's what my whole intention was, for love. And I believe that that's really who I am. And so if we think about it this way, where our personality is a structure, and then the light is coming through the structure. The light is pure. The structure is like obfuscations, it's samskaras, and it's also translucent light, like a window pane. So it's all of those things. So the light has to filter through us, our identity, our body, mind, our psyche. And so the light, it does get through, right? But it gets through differently than pure light. And that's totally fine, because that's the game we're playing here as being human. So I have a lot of compassion for the ring of humanity. And if you're born under this gene key, you really have what's called, and the phrase underneath it is a noble life. How beautiful is that? A noble life. So you really have the opportunity to have a noble life. The programming partner is 48, which is a very yin, feminine. So this is like yang, control energy. This, and its programming partner is feminine. It's the deep well. It is, but it's the shadow is inadequacy. And Richard Rudd had said, you know, every tyrant at the core of them feels inadequate. Doesn't that resonate? It resonates with me as truth. So what's the potential inside of control? Well, first we have to identify that that's kind of our MO, that we are controlling, and that control is kind of the jam of how we have managed the overwhelm in our world from our childhood, and those get patterned, and then we consistently meet them out in our adult life, and that becomes the way things are rather than the way things we created, because we don't notice that that's our pattern. So what you get invited into is noticing what's the pattern that you're operating under with respect to control. Like, are all your underwear folded inside your drawer? Or is there fucking chaos around your whole life? You know, so notice where you're playing with anti-control and with control. You know, anti-control is so seductive. I have a friend who is in a situation where he doesn't speak a lot of his needs. Well, when he does speak his needs, he speaks them controlling. And so he occurs as controlling. But on the other hand, what I witness in him is that he doesn't really speak his real needs because he's so anti-control. So he's living inside of a paradox where at the end of the day, he doesn't get any needs met. I wouldn't say any, he doesn't get his needs met. And I've witnessed it and I've shared it, but it's such a deeply held pattern. And he's so deeply anti-control that he puts up with things that don't work for him. And so that's really when we don't have boundaries. We are afraid. So the invitation to that kind of a structure would be, what are you afraid of? What would happen if you started to assert what's good for you, what you need, in a non-controlling way, in a way that invites others to actually meet it or show up with you in some way that they actually can? That's a skill set. And oftentimes, if we come from really controlling parents, we become anti-control. And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And if we have parents who are anti-control, then we haven't had any real feedback. And it's not okay for us to assert a boundary or assert feedback because it feels controlling. I mean, this is such a clusterfuck for people. And in spiritual people, they like to say, no, I'm totally surrendered. Okay. And control is, again, a lever, like it's a gas pedal. There's stuff we got to do and stuff that we don't have to do. So when it's respect to us, I remember this. I mean, I'm going to say, I'll call myself forward on this. I had a great therapist many years ago. And it was kind of when in the height of my awakening. And, you know, awakening is like wobbly, right? It's messy, it's chaotic. And he would say, I really want you to be in control in the ways that are yours to control. Like, you're not exercising enough control in your life. And really the truth was, I was totally afraid of failing, like deeply afraid of failing. And I still feel that fear occasionally. It just doesn't grip me like I think it gripped me. You know, because like when you first go on a spiritual path, I don't know if you've noticed, this was my experience, that like nothing works. Like all the ways that you were successful before, boom, crash, and you're not successful anymore. And so I was like deconstructing. And so I was just terrified to do anything. And so I was like hiring a bunch of psychics and hiring guides. And I still do things like that because I do love input, but I come from places very, very different than it used to be, which is I don't really know what to do, or I want to pretend that I don't know what to do. Totally unconscious, totally not wanting to be in control. And at the same time trying to control other people. So I was in partnership, and I was in partnership with people who were avoidance, for example, and they would do really crazy things. And so I would try, like my whole body would go into constriction and tension, and then I would try to control the situation. So do you see how control just gets, it's leaky. It's so leaky. But if I just said what I needed, and really stood in that, and then that person could decide if they could meet me or not. And if they couldn't, then they'd be out. But then I would be left with myself, and I didn't want to be left with myself. So I decided to do it all leaky and sideways. And God bless me, right? God bless any of us who decide to do things leaky and sideways, because that's all the capacity that you have until you don't, until you work on yourself, until you don't. And so the pathway of 21 is the noble life. You start to own your authority, and owning your authority starts to mean you own your seat. You own who you are. You own your sovereignty. And if you're not someone's cup of tea, then you're okay with that. It might hurt and it might be disappointing. And at the same time, you're like, but I get it. I can't compromise this part of me anymore. I can't. I have to stay true to myself. And then that becomes not controlling. It's just true. I need it this way. And it's a negotiation, right? Like life is a negotiation. And speaking your truth allows someone to calibrate off of something real instead of trying to do sonar and figure it out and start or instead of reacting to your control. Then what gets to happen is they really get to see what's at stake, what's on the table. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who's just very clear? I don't mean defensive in that way, because that's, again, they're not really clear with your truth. If you're defensive, then you're not actually authentic. You're trying to hide a vulnerability. But let's say you're just with your truth. You're not defending it. You're just knowing that for me, this doesn't work. Here's what I'd like. This is what I'd like to see. This is my vision. Then someone can react to that. Then they know where you stand and they can see themselves inside of that or not. And if it's an or not, then they can add something, and it could be a negotiation, a dance, or it's clear that it's a no. And that clear no leaves the space for a clear yes to come through. But we have to have enough of a sense of ourselves in order for that to even work, right? Because otherwise, if we're not prepared for loss, then we will manipulate and control. So here we're unpacking a bit of the matrix. There's so many nuances to this that this is really for your contemplation. And, Gene Key 21 is deeply contemplative in that way. There's a lot of power packed in it. So anything I'm saying, I don't mean to say on the nose. I really mean it in a contemplative way. Like I'm just using pointers to get you inside of it so that you can see for yourself what your matrix is. And then you get to be free. And we get to all come home to ourselves, because ultimately when we're doing all those things, we're out of ourselves. And that's the experience of being lonely right there. We are lonely when we're out of ourselves. So when I'm really with myself, when I'm here, I'm with myself and I know what I need. I don't know how it's going to get met. And that's for me to not control, because I don't know how, but I know what I need and I'm clear. And when things come in my path that is not that, then I get to say no. And then it keeps opening and opening and opening the space for the right thing to come through. And ultimately, this gene key is about valor. And I mean, I find valor super sexy. Like that's just my architecture. It's the hero, it's the shiro. I freaking love valor. It's courage with heart. And you've really, at some level, reconciled death. You know, when I think about, I'm going to cry, but when I think about the people who are on the plane going down on 9/11 and they called their families just to say they love them, that's like valor to me. That's so valor. Like, you know, you're sacrificing, you know, you've been sacrificed, you know, you're going to die. And what happens to you is freaking love, love, love. I love this energy so much. And this is, if you have 21 in your hologenetic profile, I mean, we all have this. And if you have that, you get to play with these codes inside you, either in your life work, your life purpose, or in your emotional body, of like these codes being like who you get to be, the ultimate expression of you. And I take this on. I don't have gene key 21 anywhere. It's in the ego will, ego heart, ego will part of the human design in that little triangle. And I don't have this gene key or this gate of the I Ching, but I take it on because I love it so much. So I invite us to be heroes, not to prove ourselves, not to construct a false identity so that we're seen as something, but really to embody it as an archetype, to stand in a mythic position. I mean, when you stand in a mythic position, the power of the universe runs through you. It's so epic. It really is like this. I feel it as a channel and a column of light, because you are now no longer you. You're no longer captive by the you think you are. And instead, you stand in this mythic role, allowing the energies, the primordial life force energy to flow through you. And that's how you become a hero. And life will use you. And heroes don't have to be big things like war or whatever. It could be a different kind of a hero, small acts of deep courage with your heart open. I've seen it. I've seen it among normal, average, everyday people, homeless people. It doesn't matter. There's like a deep generosity that wells up inside you. And it's beautiful. It's the light. I'm so lit up by it. I hope you are too. This concludes Gene Key 21's transmission.